when you ask people what they do, typically in a business, they'll tell you their task, or they'll even tell you what they were hired to do. Oh, I'm the scheduling coordinator in an office. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. What impact do you make on people? If I were to ask people what impact you make on them, what would you do? And they now can answer in a couple of different ways. But one of the things I want to get them to is to help them understand that their job is not to be the scheduling coordinator. Their job is literally the director of first impressions.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It's my pleasure to have Dino Watt with us. Dino is dedicated to guiding entrepreneurs and their teams on a journey from the confines of mediocrity to unprecedented sustainable growth. With his revolutionary brand, Own Your Role, Dino empowers business owners to take charge of their positions as leaders and reignite their employees' commitment by creating a shared vision and healthier workplace culture. Dino, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Stephan. I really appreciate it.
So I know you do some keynote speaking. I'd love to hear what your shtick is all about. I've seen your sizzle reel and you do a lot of dancing and stuff, but you also convey a ton of value. I'm curious how you developed this persona or this kind of style of keynote speaking.
That's a great question. Nobody's asked me that before. I love performing. I love being on stage. When I was a little kid, the very first third grade play I ever did was I had a teacher who had me lip sync to Don Henley's Dirty Laundry. I was an alien that came down for some reason, and I guess they spoke in music lyrics. And I remember having people laugh and point and have fun. And I went, I want to do this forever. So as I started developing my keynote speech, I have a couple of them. My most popular one is called How to Become an Ideal Team Player and Avoid Being a Staph Infection. And the idea around it is to help the team members really embrace their role as whatever is they're playing, and the part they play, if you will, in the office. And I realized early on, most of the people that I speak in front of they're not asking to be in the audience. They're there because they're at a convention and the owner brought them to this business convention. And so I figured I would really like to make sure that they feel their time is worthwhile spent there and they learn something, and not just something that they can help them in their role in their office, but in their role at home. So have a better marriage, have a better, feel better as a mom or a dad or a citizen or whatever. And so I figured if I can bring some entertainment to that, then why not? And what's more entertaining than seeing a 50-year-old man dance like Beyonce on stage? There's not a lot more entertaining than that. So I just added that. I like to be goofy and funny and self-deprecating and also get a message across. And it seems to work really well.
So it sounds like that Don Henley experience you had as a kid was really profound and kind of pivotal. It just cemented in for you a path.
Yeah. I tell this story from stage sometimes when I'm speaking to speakers. I do a speaking training every once in a while, and I will talk about how I'm a third child. So I have two older brothers, and then I have a younger sister. And everything I got growing up was a hand-me-down, right? So it was somebody else's thing they wanted first, their style, their whatever, and they got tired of it, and then I got it. So I never got anything that was my own. And I remember that being the first thing of me realizing, oh, this is my thing. My oldest brother was just like great at everything. He was the star child, right? Then my middle brother was amazing at sports. I was terrible at sports. And I had no interest in them. And this was the first thing when people were laughing and having fun with me that I went, ooh, this is my thing. Hugh, Tim, they can't do this. And to this day, they still can't do this. That's my thing. So it really did. It made me realize at a very young age, if I just kept doing this, I would own this thing. And it's worked out. It's been really fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have this theory that it's all a divine setup here, and that was a setup for you. That was totally like a softball. Here you go, lobbed at you. Knock this one out of the park.
Stephan, I agree with you. I've had a couple of those things in my life. The other thing was my wife. I met her when I was 5. We dated off and on a little bit through high school and stuff, but we've been married now 29 years, and we've talked about before, like, why did God set it up this way? Like, it was such a softball thing. Hey, here's the girl that you're going to be with the rest of your life. You're going to meet her at 5 years old, and she's going to be your neighbor. And it's a really cool story, but it also is one of those things that I absolutely believe it was a divine setup. I love that word. I'm going to use that from now on. I'm going to steal it from you. Divine setup.
That's awesome. Wow. 5 years old. I love that. Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day because we're going to do, have you heard the Camino, the walk across the Spain? It's a Camino de Santiago, I believe it is.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I have heard about it. Yeah.
500-mile walk across Spain has been a goal of ours for a while. We're in training for to do it next year in July. And it's 500 miles, right? And a lot of people who do it on their own, it's a spiritual experience, right? You got to sit with your own thoughts. I was talking to her as we were on our walk the other day, and I went, what are we going to talk about? We talk about everything. Like, what are we going to talk about on this walk? But we'll figure it out.
Just having that intention of up leveling the kind of intimacy and connection, communication for that trip will almost certainly bring it about.
Sure, absolutely. We're super excited about it. It'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife Ryan and I, we went to the biohacking conference. What was that? 2 weeks ago in Orlando. Of course, this episode will air in 2 or 3 months. But when we're talking right now in July, it was just a couple weeks ago, and we were in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Two of us kind of squeezed in there, experiencing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And 20 minutes of just like two little sausages in this container where we had nowhere to go, and couldn't just like zone out or be on our phones or anything. It was a beautiful, really deep conversation and connection and looking into each other's eyes and everything.
That's cool. That is neat. I want that experience now.
Yeah. Yeah. So get a hyperbaric oxygen,
Yeah.
whatever it's called, chamber. Yeah, awesome. So now, how do you apply your faith and your belief and everything kind of being a divine setup in how you show up on stages and with clients and in your marketing? What are some of the really cool, unusual things that you do that you don't see a lot of your competition doing in that regard?
Well, first of all, my intention for every time I step on stage is this idea of getting more, right? I want people to have more. I heard it years ago from Brendan Burchard, and I just was like, oh my gosh, that's so smart. I want to help more people understand that, which is it's the only thing that connects every single human being on the planet, which is the desire for more. Some people want more water. Some people want more peace. Some people want more love, health, whatever it might be. We all want something more. My intention is how can I help people get more in their life, and not just the life in the office, but outside. Because I believe if I can help them get more out there, they're going to automatically bring that positivity and that connection to more inside the office. The second thing is my vision for my business. What I do is to reverse the direction of divorce, addiction, and suicide amongst private practice owners and their team members. And so all of my content, everything I create is based around, is this going to help people get more and in some way reverse the direction of divorce, addiction, or suicide in themselves or their office? So I work a lot in the medical field. I started my business in the dental and ortho space, and dentists, depending on the year, have either the number one or number two rate of suicide amongst like blue collar workers or white collar workers. And so it kind of became that mission for me. So the content that I teach is always going to have an idea of how to improve your relationships, your conversations, your communication, all this stuff. But it's going to be wrapped in some sense of just real, either humor or factual, situational experience that I know they've all had because they have a human existence and we all have a similar human existence. Number one, we're all weird. And number two is that we all deal with the same stuff that everybody else does, just at different times. And we think we're special, but we're not. And so when I can point that out to them, and I love it when I see this like, oh, this like aha, like, oh, he's right. They go over to their chairmate. They're like, oh, that's so me, or oh, that's so you. And that aha is what I'm always looking for. And so I build my content around that, and it makes a lot of fun.
Hmm. And what was the big aha that you got when you were in an audience somewhere at a seminar or conference, trade show, whatever?
That's a great question. The biggest aha I ever got was I was at a real estate seminar. I had just started dabbling in real estate a little bit. For those of people who are in real estate, they might remember Carlton Sheets back in the day. I got some Carlton Sheets books, and somehow I was invited to a seminar. And I had just given up my dream of performing and acting in Hollywood. I lived in Hollywood. I worked behind the scenes. I was a performer, and a makeup artist. I did makeup artistry for years in the movie industry. And I wanted to be a dad. I had my wife and I had 3 kids in 3 years. And it's just not conducive to try to be an actor and have 3 small kids. And I know some people do it, but the majority of people, you don't make money. So I decided I needed to give up on my dream and find a quote unquote real job with not a lot of skills. I didn't go to college or anything like that. And so I'm sitting in this conference and I see this guy talking about taxes. So boring. Could be, but he was funny. He was engaging. I remember going like, this guy should be on, and I went, oh wait, he is. He's on a stage. He's performing. I'm in the audience. He's going to get paid. And suddenly the world of personal development outside of the industry, but still performing, was opened up to me. This thing I was actually, and I admit this, in certain situations, that I was kind of bitter at my kids for a while because, they made me quote unquote give up my dream. When they would do something, they'd act out. Here they are, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, right? And they'd act out, and I'd be in my head going, you don't understand. I gave up on my dream for you, right? And and I'd be bitter. And suddenly I realized my dream wasn't about being a star or a celebrity. My dream was about, I wanted to perform. That 5th or 3rd grade kid that got that attention and got that one thing that was his suddenly was seeing it in a different light of going, oh, I could still be on a stage. I could still perform. I could still be in front of an audience. I can get paid. And I went everything I could do to figure out how to be a speaker, how to get up on stages and train people in a very intense and fun manner. And that was the biggest aha for me. Like without that moment, I don't know if I'd be sitting here talking to you.
Well, again, part of the divine setup, right? That tax session that you attended was no accident.
Yeah, absolutely. That was 20 years ago. Like, that was huge.
Awesome. And then so what did you feel like you've not given up a dream of, but actually realized that dream? So you gave up on that dream of acting, but you had other dreams too, I'm sure. What was something that came to fruition and you're like, wow, that's like winning the lottery?
Well, the most important one was definitely being the dad that I could be home and be with my kids and dictate my own schedule. The lottery part, I think, is with the business now. I jokingly tell people when they ask me what I do, and I explain it, and sometimes I kind of give a subcontext of basically I made up a job, I wrote a book about it, and now people pay me to do that. So I didn't know growing up I had dyslexia. I just thought I was dumb. I can't spell worth the beans. I love spell check. It's my friend, and Siri is the best girlfriend I could possibly ask for. Right, because I can't spell. My wife being an English major, that's a challenge, right? But I was able to figure out what I was really good at, what my, as Dan Sullivan talks about, my genius, right? Not the stuff I'm just excellent at, but my genius, and take that and create and provide for my family, right? Pretty good life. Like, they've traveled around the world. We were able to spend 2013 in an RV traveling around the country for 13 months, right? Like, those type of things are the blessings that I could not have seen and foreseen before then. And we've had the challenges too. I've gone bankrupt. I've had cars repossessed, but all of that was a blessing. And one really big blessing that I didn't see as a blessing at the time, but I knew would be, was during the real estate crash in 2008 and 2009, made some really bad real estate investments and lost almost everything except for our house. And the only reason we kept our house is I had to take a job knocking doors, selling home alarm systems in Yuma, Arizona, in the middle of the summer. If any of you lived in Yuma, Arizona in the middle of summer, you know how bad that is. But like 120-degree heat, it was terrible. But every door I knocked, and I was the oldest person in the crew, and all, but I said, do it. And I did. I was able to save my family, save our home. But every door I knocked, I was like, I will tell this story from the stage someday. I will tell the story. So those are like blessings that I didn't see at the time that I absolutely see now, and I'm so grateful for.
Mm. Well, one of the kind of core precepts in Judaism is that everything is a blessing. It's just that not everything that you see as a blessing is obvious to you because it's disguised. It's like it's either a revealed blessing or a not yet revealed blessing.
Yeah, so true. It's so true.
How did you turn things around when you were bankrupt and got your car repossessed and all that? How did you you had this hunger to go, I'm just going to do whatever it takes. I'll go in 120-degree heat and go from door to door. What was a turning point for you, or some sort of, some manna falling from heaven, some sort of miracle dropping into your lap? What was it?
That was really hard. And I learned a lot I did 2 summers of that. And like I said, allowed me to save my home, to be able to feed my kids and get back on my feet again. Working that hard and seeing the fruits of that was a big aha, but also I never want to do that again moment. So what can I do to figure it out? I'll go back to that road trip that we took. We started planning for it about 2011. And there were just things that fell into place that should not have fallen in place. There were, from getting the truck we needed and the fifth wheel trailer that we found randomly, which we should not have been able to afford, but we found a program that was a government program that allowed us to lease the truck, and they paid us to drive it, and like all this crazy stuff that when we tell people the real story, if we had 2 hours to go through, people are like, that's insane. And I've never heard of that program before or since, and then how it all worked out in the end. But
A divine setup again, right? That program was just for you. You were the only ones.
total divines. I mean, you have, like, seriously, when my wife and I look back on that and we talk about how those things happened, there's no denying the divine setup of that. And the moment, though, that I recall, even now, all these years later, now 10 years later, it was December 31st, 2013. We had finished the trip. We drove up in front of our house that we had rented out for the year that we were gone. And I remember driving up and parking in front of the house and looking to my front door. And I just got emotional. I started crying. And I went, I can do anything now. I took my family on a little bit longer than a year-long road trip across the country. We didn't have buckets of cash waiting for us. I had to figure it out on the road. All this other divine intervention stuff happened. But in that moment of just, I can do anything. Like, there's nothing I can't do. And from there, my business is just every year improved, and want to do a lot more. And sometimes I have to because you're further away from the miracle, the more you think, well, is that really true? I do have to remind myself of that sometimes, just being like, oh yeah, I forgot I can't do anything. That was a huge moment in my life. Yeah.
I was just talking with a group of guys on another mastermind I'm in called Metal. We're in Genius Network together. There's some Genius Network men who are also in Metal, which is men only. It's awesome group. Highly recommend it, by the way. Metal.men if you want to go check out their website. Some of these Metal brothers were on a Zoom call, and we were just talking about how this idea of divine setups and so forth. And if God is your business partner, everything shifts. So God is my business partner, I asked him, and he said yes. And I don't have to run around from conference to conference like I used to. I spoke a lot. And I don't have to do that anymore. I have a 3-year-old. I don't want to be on the road all the time, 2 or 3 times a month. It was insane. So now I don't have to. Not that I had to before, but I believed I had to. So I made that reality real. And then now it just seems like the synchronicities are on steroids now. They're just like everywhere. So that's something that you might consider. I learned this concept from Curtis Thomas, who was a guest on my other podcast on Get Yourself Optimized. And that really stuck. And so within weeks, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, because Curtis can have God as his business partner. And he learned it from another guy that is a friend of his. And he said, like, what's your secret? Well, how are things going so well? I'm really surprised. And he's like, well, God's my business partner. He's like, what? Tell me more about that. So we talked about that on the podcast. And then within weeks, I'm asking God to be my business partner. And
It totally makes sense. Yeah, no, absolutely.
it's beautiful. So that's on maybe another level in this game of life for you, is to have God be your business partner.
I believe that he not only inadvertently has been, right? I grew up really in a belief that, I'm not alone. Even when I'm alone, I'm not, right? And so that's always a call to me of like, okay, what's the next step? What could I do? Where should I go? And that's definitely a part of my belief system. My belief system has evolved over the last, couple of years, and it's been really wonderful and beautiful and freeing, and feeling that I really am connected in a bigger way than even I thought before. So it's been great.
Mm-hmm. How did you center in on a vision of where you're reversing divorce and addiction and suicide? Why those three things?
I think we care most about what we know most. And my parents divorced when I was 8 years old. I remember standing on the sidewalk watching my father pack up his Honda hatchback and being like, dude, I can help you. I can fix this. I know why mom gets upset when you do X and why you get upset when you do Y. And, I'm 8, so no one's listening to me. Uh, and that divorce was a very pivotal part of my life. It made me really want to understand relationships. When my wife and I got married, it was very intentional. We talked about everything. We have a core value in our marriage, which is radical transparency. There's nothing we can't talk about. There's nothing we don't know about each other. No secrets, no passwords. We don't know all that type of stuff, but we are very intentional about it. So that was the first part of it. Addiction was something that I never really dealt with a lot in my life, but I saw in my family's life, especially my extended family. And I know the dangers of that in my industry. When I started to get into it, I saw the big challenges with it. And as you know, as we talk about in Genius Network, I do remember sitting around in Genius Network a few times, because a lot of it is around addiction. And you have people who talk about, their multi-million-dollar businesses or their billion-dollar businesses that they built up as an addict to something. And I remember just being like, dude, what's my excuse, right? Like, these guys are building multi-million-dollar businesses and I'm not an addict to any of this stuff. If they did that during addiction, I should be able to do something pretty cool too. And then suicide is two stories. Number one is a friend of mine asked me to do a speech in the orthodontic space. I had never done that before in the ortho space. And I remember I was talking about marriage. I used to have a business called The Business of Marriage, where I would help put business principles inside of marriages to help people out, people that you might know, like Garrett Gunderson and stuff like that I've helped out through that process. So I was speaking on that. I had a gentleman come up to me right after I spoke and said, I'm on my third marriage, which is going to end in divorce. My practice is in shambles. My team member is about to leave me. I need some help. I was like, cool, let's talk. And every time we talked, it would be like, well, I'm not ready yet. Well, I got this other thing to do from his side. And we end up losing kind of contact. And 3 months after that, November of that year, I got a call from a mutual friend who said, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? I said, no, what's up? And he said, yeah, he killed himself this weekend. And I went, come on, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't think it's that hard of a fix if you know how to have the conversation and you know what you're talking to or who you're talking to. Then on a personal level, I have two younger adopted brothers who, with my mom's second marriage, they adopted. And the oldest of the two, almost 5 years ago, took his life. That affected my family in a pretty profound way. And so I just kind of look at it, and I'm very grateful that I've been blessed since I was a kid to have the ability to look from the outside and go, okay, well, if this isn't working, let's do this. And when I worked in the movie industry, that was one of my biggest challenges, is that the movie industry goes so slow because everybody can only do the job they're told to do. Even if you can see, well, if we just move this light right now, we'd be out of here 15 minutes earlier. But you have to go through the union people, and this person has to do it, and that's not your job. And so don't touch that. And that's insane to me. And so if I can see a shorter path to help you get to this place, then I want to help you do that. And I started looking at the areas where most entrepreneurs, most business owners, we were talking about beforehand, Justin Breen, and he talks about most entrepreneurs that are at a higher level have experienced some traumatic challenge when they were a kid, bankruptcy, anxiety, or depression. And I started seeing that as a truth. I didn't know that before I spoke to Justin, but I saw that as a truth in my own life and other people's lives and went, okay, I think I can help out with this on a practical level. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, just practical life skill level. What can we do? And so that's where it became the vision for me. And it drives everything I do every day. Even this podcast, right? When I agree to do a podcast, I'm like, okay, well, this in some way hopefully helps someone on the listening end of this go, oh, I never thought about it that way. I'm not looking for them to reach out to me. I'm just looking to reach into themselves and go, oh yeah, that's true. For example, I was that kid in school who knew everybody. Like I got along with everyone, the heavy metalers, the emo people, the drama people, the sports people. I got along with everybody. And I remember even back then, I wanted to write a book. I had a friend who would come to school and talk about the ulcers that she has. And I'd be like, are you kidding? We're in high school. What do you got ulcers for? Like we had nothing to worry about. Now, I didn't know the stuff that was going on in her life in a really traumatic way that I do know now. But I used to want to write a book called Build a Bridge and Get Over It. And the book would be, a chapter would be, I'm fighting with my spouse and they don't understand me. And you turn the page and it just says, build a bridge and get over it. Next chapter. I'm having trouble with people in my work. They're not communicating with me the way that I want. Turn the page, build a bridge and get over it. Like everyone's got a problem. Everyone's got a challenge. Build a bridge and get over it. So I never wrote that book, but that's kind of my attitude with so many things. Like, all right, build a bridge and get over it.
Did you ever get back in touch with the girl who had ulcers?
Yeah, we're actually really good friends on Facebook, where you go back and forth on some stuff. She's had a very difficult, traumatic life, and unfortunately is definitely the product of that belief system now. But very faithful person. She has a very strong faith in God. But yeah, went through some crazy trauma growing up. So I totally get it, right? But as a teenager, you're just like, what's the problem? What's going on? We're teenagers.
Yeah. Well, you know the book, The Body Keeps the Score?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that principle is really true, that you store unresolved trauma and emotions in your body in different places, and all makes sense when you kind of zoom out and you think about how these different organs and systems in your body work together. And yeah, none of this is random. So if you can unpack what the lesson is, if whether it's ulcers or lower back pain or whatever, then you go a long ways towards releasing that and not having to get the lesson a different way.
Yeah, my wife really introduced me to the mind-body connection years ago. She's a massage therapist, and she learned massage. It's how we survived the first couple of years of our marriage. Is she was a massage therapist, but she learned from a very intense program in California. And I used to kind of be like, all right, whatever, woo-woo, type stuff. And she has incredible stories of people who are on her table. And one lady, I remember her talking about, she was just doing her massage and suddenly my wife saw the red handprints on the lady's chest and was just like, what is going on? And the lady starts crying and she's like, are you okay? What's going on? Lady was living through the rape that she had gone through with the person who was holding their hands, choking her. And whatever Shannon was doing, pushed that energy up into that. She has story after story of those things, the type of things happening. And so I absolutely believe that there is that mind-body connection. I know that I have talked myself through getting better quicker when I knew I had a speech coming up and I needed my voice, or I couldn't be sick, or I had to do a full 4 or 5 hour training and I had been throwing up the whole night before, right? Because of food poisoning or whatever. I know that's all, like, the mind is so incredibly powerful. I actually teach this. If I can tell this quick story, I was born blind. So it's a really weird, rare condition. And my mom, I said earlier, I have 2 older brothers. She wanted a girl desperately because my dad was the type, he was just like, we're not having more kids. Number 3, that's it. No more kids. My mom wanted a girl desperately. My mom is very much a girly girl. My mom is very much into makeup to this day, right? She's 70 something years old and just got through surgery, but is going to be putting on full makeup, right? Type stuff. And back then, they didn't have the ultrasounds to figure out if I was a boy or a girl. I come out, not a girl. My mom doesn't even hold me, doesn't want anything to do with me, gives the nurses, take him to the nursery, goes into major depression. She then takes me home a couple days later, and her and my dad start noticing that I'm not responding to things like light or tracking. That a normal, they'd had two other babies. They know what I would, be doing. Take me back to the doctors. Doctors say, yeah, he is blind. And we think it's just a slow development of his eyes. It's not permanent, we think. And within about 2 weeks, I started to track things and got my sight, obviously. Well, the doctors will tell you it was a slow development. I believe now that I've learned about the mind-body connection and I learned how powerful that is, I truly believe that as an infant in my mother's womb, I knew how disappointed she was going to be when I came out. And I did not want to see my mother disappointed. To this day, I hate seeing my mom disappointed. I can't look when she's crying. I look away. I truly believe that I knew as an infant that my mother would be disappointed. And I felt that. And so I blinded myself so I would not see that. And my mom will tell you the story that as soon as she found out I was blind, she felt, oh my gosh, God's punishing me for this. And I don't believe that's true, but she felt that. She felt God's punishing me for not holding my baby and not being grateful for it. And took me in her arms and, and now I became her baby again, obviously. And she treated me great or whatever. I absolutely pull this story out every once in a while, by the way, at Christmas, right? Like, Mom, remember you didn't hold me when I was first born, right? So I love to tease her like that. But I do believe I'm the weirdo in my family. I'm such the black sheep. Most of my family doesn't know what I do for a living, but I love to tease my mom with that stuff. But I do believe that's why I have that mind-body connection of being blind.
Let's talk about what the heck this own your role concept is about and why should our listener care about that?
They should care if they want themselves to up-level how they show up in not just their work, but in every part of their life. And if they want their team members to do the same thing. I mentioned the title of one of my speeches earlier about avoid being a staph infection. This actually came from, I mentioned him earlier, Garrett Gunderson is a friend of mine, and he has said this for years, and it just started really sinking into me about how important and true it is. He always say, if you hire for a task, you create enslavement for yourself. But if you hire for a role, you create freedom. Years ago, I worked for Disney. I was a dancer, and I always wanted to work and be a parade dancer at Disneyland. And in 1991, I became a dancer for Disney. I know some people listening weren't even born. You probably weren't born in 91, were you? When I worked for Disney, they really kind of pushed this idea of your goal is to make it a magical day. The part you play, at Disney, you don't have employees that have cast members, right? So I was cast as the character of an alligator in Mickey's Merry Christmas Parade. My role is to make it a magical day. They very much emphasize people come to Disney and some of them spend their life savings on this one trip to Disney. They're bringing their family from across the country, across the world. So our goal as cast members is to do whatever we can to make it a magical day. If it's raining, even though it's California, we make it a magical day. Whatever we can do. Now, to a point, right? We want to make sure that these people make it a magical day. So I'm in an alligator outfit. And if you want to envision what it's like to be a parade dancer in an alligator costume at Disney or any other costume, just take a sleeping bag and put it upside down over your body and cut a little hole out for breathing and a little bit of vision, and then dance for a quarter of a mile. And that's what it's like to be a Disney parade dancer. What I realized was my role was to make it a magical day as an alligator. Even though they couldn't see my face, my role wasn't just to be a dancer to go through the steps. My role was to, if I could see a little kid on the side of the road and I could go up and be the one to give them a high five, or I could point that out to them and let them know I see them and wave to them and they can wave back. I just made it a magical day. So the ownership of that role required me to do a couple of things. It required me to have full accountability for that part, and I was just a small part in this big, huge parade that lasted really about 5 minutes, if I'm lucky, to the people on the sidelines. Now, before I moved on to somebody else, I needed to be curious about what I was doing to find the right people and see how, even if I wasn't feeling good that day, even if I was hot, sweating inside that sleeping bag costume, my job was to make it a magical day. So when I look at this in the world today, and I've been consulting with businesses now for over a decade, especially in the medical space, and now we're really branching that out to anybody, is I looked at it and said, when you ask people what they do, typically in a business, they'll tell you their task, or they'll even tell you what they were hired to do. Oh, I'm the scheduling coordinator in an office. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. What impact do you make on people? Like if I were to ask people what impact you make on them, what would you do? And they now can answer in a couple of different ways. But one of the things I want to get them to is to help them understand that their job is not to be the scheduling coordinator. Their job is literally the director of first impressions. The first impression somebody has in any business is that phone call. Sometimes it's the website. Hopefully, I have a really good website that gives them a good impression. But then they're going to call and they're going to talk to a human being, hopefully. And that human being's job is to be the director of first impressions. So now when I stand on stage and I show people, okay, well, you think you're the front desk receptionist or the front desk coordinator or scheduling coordinator, whatever these generic names are, I don't believe you're that. I believe you're the director of first impressions. And Stephan, I gotta tell you, one of my favorite views is from the stage. And I say this to people, and suddenly shoulders go back and people sit straighter and they look at each other like, yeah, I am the director of first impressions. And suddenly the role that they are given completely different. They own it in a completely different way. When I go to business owners, so like I said, I work in the dental or the medical field, and one of them is the orthodontic field. So I'll say, hey, doctors, doctor's a cool title. You worked for it, you get it. But what if instead of just a doctor like everybody else is out there, what if you were a smile architect instead? Oh, yeah, I like being a smile architect. That's right. Like it just levels them up. So owning your role is about understanding that if you take on the role that you play, all of a sudden how you own it and how you step up changes everything. You're no longer just an alligator dancing down a parade route. You're now making it a magical day for people. And you can take that and extrapolate that out into a fatherhood. You mentioned your kids. Like, all right, what does the greatest father in the world do? How do you react? Do they go out and speak, 230 times a year? Or do they say, you know what, I'm going to figure out another way to own my role as a father and a business owner so I don't have to be on the road as much. No matter how much I love it, my kids deserve to have me in their life more. And so I'm going to own the role of that. What about being a husband? What does it mean to own your role as a husband or a wife? And all of a sudden you start looking at it a little differently as opposed to using the word just, right? That you actually own the thing. So that's what owning your role is all about, in a very long-winded way to your short question.
I love that. That's really cool. And it reminds me a little bit of, I learned this from Aaron Ross. I had him on the show a long time ago, episode 30. He wrote the book From Impossible to Inevitable. And one of these chapters was just so profound for me. It started off with a letter from the employee to the employer. You just don't get me, or what I'm, my challenges and my motivations or anything. You're just not there for me. Blah 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 blah. Whatever. That's that. And then there was a letter from the employer to the employee. It was like same planet, different worlds. They just didn't get each other. And there was an explanation about functional ownership. So you got to give the employee ownership. You don't have to give them financial ownership, although you could certainly do some sort of stock option plan or phantom stock or whatever, but giving them functional ownership sounds very much like owning your role, and just really was great concept. I loved hearing that from Aaron. So what you're talking about definitely resonates. Yeah. And I also like how you restructure in the person's mind how they relate to the role with some really sexy terminology, whether it's a smile architect or some sort of, you know, alchemist or director of first impressions or some sort of wizard or director of chaos or whatever. It's like I feel much more empowered and powerful and excited and remarkable, memorable because of this new shift and this new title, this new way of looking at how I show up in the company.
Well, even on the other side of that, and I totally agree with you, on the other side of that is the way that the guest, the client, the customer looks at you, right? I remember Jim Do changed my frame of mind and reference of how I look for my financial planners, because he said, okay, is your person a financial historian or fortune teller? And I went, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with financial historians, people who just tell me what happened last year, as opposed to, no, Dino, if you want this outcome, let's fortune tell what you should be doing, right? These are the steps you need to be taking. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, the person I'm looking for my business has completely shifted. Because if you're just a historian, I don't need that. I need somebody who can help me do this. And I think it just helps clear the way. I mean, think about it. You walk into an office and you walk up to the, director of first impressions, and they say, "Oh, your smile architect will be with you in just a moment." You're like, "Who?" Like everybody everywhere else, they've got a dentist or they've got an assistant or whatever. It's like, wait a minute. And so you reframe it and it makes all the difference in the world. And I love that idea, from impossible to probable,
Impossible to inevitable. Yeah.
to inevitable. Even, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the terminology many of us marketers have heard before: surprise and delight.
Yes.
If I go into a dentist's office or an orthodontist office and I hear that your smile architect is about to be available in just a minute, I'm like, what? You surprised and delighted me.
That's right. No, I love that phrase, surprise and delight too. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I know you've got some sort of team transformation experience. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think that's relevant to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. So, in all of this, own your role and the work I've been doing with teams, I really wanted to create a space where people could learn and have fun. And for a lot of business owners, my ideal clients who I work with are usually between 10 and 60 team members. I always say, if you know the names of all of your team members, then you're my ideal client, right? And yet for businesses that are in that size and that range, it's hard for them to really be able to afford to take their entire team to a conference in Vegas or Miami or wherever. And so I thought, how can I create a situation where I'm helping team members and owners all together, a great experience, give them 6 to 7 hours, a process that will change their life and help them unify together. And so when I went on that road trip, actually back in 2012 and 13, I had to figure out how to take my business online. So all of my clients were online pretty much. I would fly out to a few things. But then when COVID happened and everybody went to virtual trainings, I had already been doing that for years. So I was like, this is no problem. And so I was talking to my wife about this, and last year she said, because my whole idea has always been, how do I get people out here? Like the logistics are a lot. I'd love to have 10 team member or 10 teams together in a room doing a intensive event. And she said, why don't you just do it virtually? And so I created a virtual event, which is, I call it an interactive broadcast digital experience, where it's not just me sitting here doing a PowerPoint in front of people. It's from a stage, multi-camera interaction. We're having them doing surveys with their phones and, calling people out and doing one-on-ones and hot seats and all this crazy, very interactive stuff in 6 hours. And so we call it the Team Transformation Experience. We do it twice a year. At the beginning of the year to launch the year and kick it off really, really well. We do that in January. And then we do another one in June to kick off the summer. And there's Speaking of surprise and delight, there's a lot of surprise and delight that goes on. The last one I sent a wow box inside of it. Matter of fact, I happen to have it here. I have a little bobblehead of a what would Dino do bobblehead that everybody gets, to remind them afterwards. I send out certain lessons and processes that they do. We give away games and have prizes, and or give away prizes and have games. That's what I should have said. It's so much fun and interactive. And we've had over 1,000 team members go through it over this last year. It's been a ton of fun. And the coolest thing is that it's one fee for the entire office. Doesn't matter how many people you have. It's one fee for the entire office. And that's something that you don't see out there. Usually it's a per person type situation. And that comes into the play of, should we go to this or not? So I try to make it as Alex Hormozy would say, an offer so good they'd feel stupid not saying yes to it. And that's what I try to do.
Oh, that's awesome. And are there lots of people from different companies, or is it just a per company sort of virtual event?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, lots of people from different companies. So in January, we had 52 offices from around the world. We had a team from Australia, a team from the UK. This last one, that UK team came again in June. They enjoyed it so much in January because it's 2 different curriculum. It's offices all over the place. The next one will be 6 hours. 7 hours. We've done 6 hours, but we're going to do 7 hours this next time because of time changing difference, right? You got to look at that of how many people being able to get home by 5 and things like that. But it's all over, and it's different mediums. So it's just so much fun. Yeah. Pretty much every office, even though our process and what we do is a little different, right? The challenges we have with human beings, again, because I'll say this, like I said earlier, we're all weird. They're not very dissimilar. So we talk about unifying processes for across the board. It doesn't matter what the industry is.
Awesome. Well, I know we're out of time here. So if you want to point our listener or viewer to learn more from you, to work with you, all that sort of stuff, if you also want to share a parting word of wisdom, something we haven't already discussed.
All right. Well, first of all, let me say this has been totally fun. Love how you asked me at the beginning, like what's been my favorite podcast. And I've said, I just love a good conversation, and you're a great conversationalist, and this is a lot of fun. So I appreciate you having me on the show. It really means a lot. And I hope those that are listening got something out of it that they can take back to their lives.
Yeah, not just their businesses, but their lives. Yeah.
Yeah, their lives. Yeah. I'll throw this out there. If you haven't subscribed already to this podcast, you need to do so, because he's giving out good stuff. Like, people need to do that. So they can find out more about me. They can follow me on all the socials at Dino Watt, DINOWATT. There's no S on the end of that. And then DinoWatt.com is where you find out more about my speaking and my keynotes. Dino Watt Consulting, you'll find out a lot about the more kind of deeper stuff I do. I only take on a handful of clients per year because it is at a higher level, but the DinoWatt.com is a good place for that. And then Your Team Transformation is where you find out about team transformation experience, yourteamtransformation.com. But parting words, I believe this to just be a truth in my life, and I think in most people's lives, is I very much care about relationships. I think relationships are what I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before in some format about how important relationships are. But I came to a realization a few years back of why I care so much about relationships. And what I realized is that every single thing I've ever received in my life, even up to this podcast right now, you and I happening to be in Genius Network together, everything I've received up into my life until this moment has been through a relationship that I've created in some way and cultivated in some way. Might not be super deep, might not be my best friend, but it is a relationship. And everything I will receive from this moment forward will be from a relationship that I create and cultivate. So for me, the most important business attribute I could possibly have is building a relationship.
Yeah, and cultivate them.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you never know. You never know.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those great parting words. Very wise. And again, DinoWatt.com for your speaking, and your teamtransformation.com. We'll put all these links into the show notes as well, of course. And thank you very much, Dino. And thank you, listener. We'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.